Anne is an accomplished coach, teacher, and mentor renowned for her work with impact leaders who challenge the status quo. As the creator of the IICT globally accredited modality, the metatonic completion method, and the founder of the Artemisia Energetics Academy, she has made significant contributions to the field of facilitation, business, and leadership. With thousands of lives transformed by her work, Jessicka has a reputation for helping clients reclaim their essence, own their expression, and expand their impact. Through her unique model of holistic leadership, she supports clients to merge the worlds of the tangible and extra-physical, providing practical strategies and paradigm-shifting insights to future-proof their business. Jessicka, welcome. Thank you for joining me on the show today.
I'm so excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
Like a lot of my other guests, the algorithm gods on Instagram brought you into my awareness, and what a gift it has been. And you don't know this, but your words dive deep into my soul as an entrepreneur. I feel less lonely when I read what you've posted, and I feel like my courage restores after reading and listening to your content. And from industry perspective, you are certainly not a cardboard cutout coach. And I'm so excited to have you chat to me today and talk about the work that you're doing with entrepreneurs. And so one of the things that I really love about what you do is that you help entrepreneurs expand their vision and intuitively help them create more impact. To me, that is change making at its best. And I'm curious, what led you to this work and this mission?
Oh, wow. How far back do we want to go? Do we want to get the popcorn out, or are we wanting the highlight reel?
Whatever you feel intuitively you want to share.
It's funny, like I'm a bit of a Steve Jobs fangirl. I periodically will revisit certain things. I don't know if you've ever seen his Stanford commencement speech where he talks about his journey up until where he was with Apple and all of those pieces. But there's just always this one, and I get goosebumps even now when I'm thinking about it. But he talks about that idea of it's impossible to connect the dots looking forward. However, when you look back, it's always those things where you go, this was the path. It was always the path. How could it not lead here? And I think that very much in my experience, it's been connecting the dots looking backwards. So I'm like, I think that this was always going to be the way that the cookie was going to crumble. However, like in terms of, it was definitely not a linear path, like to track where I started to where I am now. It's like, I don't think I would have been able to figure it out at the beginning. If I was to talk about some of the biggest catalyzing elements for me, I think, I'm a Scorpio moon, first house, death and rebirth is where I live. And it's always been this pieces around what does it take to come back to yourself? And that has been a driving question for me. If I think back, what's really allowed me to continue to find the breadcrumbs, it's been, how do I come home? How do I come back to me after the sense of who I thought I was has fallen apart? And so in that journey, recognizing what actually really allows me to feel alive is also supporting other people to come home to themselves. And from those pieces that I've gathered on the search, it's like, we've got one wild, crazy life here. You've got this, each of us has a unique creative essence and force that we're here to impart in the world. What's blocking it? How do we bring it through?
Yeah. It's so funny because in preparation for this podcast, I was thinking, I wonder if she's a Scorpio. I wonder if there's like strong Scorpio placements, because you are such a true, and I know it's a lifelong journey, of course, coming home to yourself and discovering more parts, but very few people are the true expression of who they are. And I feel like your website, the way you present, the way you speak, the way you deep dive, the way you talk about things, your posts is so true. And you can feel the Scorpio aspects. And I love that I picked it. I'm so proud of myself for knowing that. but it is, because it's obvious, right? It is a true expression. And I love that you are talking about that has been the underpinning thing to get you to where you are now, that it is about that journey home, that wanting to understand who you are and where you are, and the mechanics of the way that the mind works, the way that the soul wants to express itself. And I just think it is why your work resonates so strongly with me. And because you've got that beautiful intuitive, I can feel the strong intuitive expression. It's not, you're not posting for the sake of posting. There's no orchestration in there. There might be some planning and some thoughtfulness to it, absolutely, but it's not forced, and it's not definitely not superficial. But I just love it. And you know, from someone outside looking in, and I'm not sure how often you hear it, but you are nailing it. You are so nailing it. And I'm so excited for you, and I'm so excited for our audience to get to know you today too.
Thanks so much, Maryanne. I actually, one thing that really excited me when you reached out to have this conversation is I really feel how much you strive for authenticity. Like I feel that that's a very strong shared value. And it was funny, just before, for context for everyone that wasn't here privy to the pre-show conversation, we're obviously talking about the fact that it's pretty torrid times. It's like there's a lot going on energetically, there's a lot going astrologically right now. How is your relationship with authenticity evolving right now?
Yeah. That's the question, isn't it? What is your level of authenticity, and what is your relationship with it? What does that look like? How is that embedded in your day to day? And for me, I mean, I wear my heart on my sleeve. There's no mistaking how I feel, that's for sure. But the the integrity attached to the authenticity is my combo, because I can't do fake shit, and I can't do pretending, and I can't really do superficial conversations either. And one of my favorite posts of yours recently, and it is probably my number one favorite post of all time, is that, are you being an energetic fuckboy? That is a post that I absolutely love. I pissed myself laughing. I thought it was hilarious. But the conversation you were having around that was directed at our industry and coaches in general, right? Can you talk more to that conversation?
It was interesting because often I will have aspects circulating in my awareness for a bit. It's like I'll make an observation, and I think I was thinking about this because my son is in Gemini, natural comedian, right? So always looking at things through a lens of culture, I think, is a big part of the Gemini makeup. We're very tapped into what culture is. And so for me, I'm constantly making observations around culture. So whether or not that's in the entrepreneurial space, the coaching industry. And there was this period where I just had this piece circulating around the masks that we feel we need to put on. And I'm like, how do I articulate this in a way that I'm not, because that's the other thing too. Like I'm not here to punch down. Like I'm also, as much as, yes, I'm making commentary on what's occurring out there, I'm also very much aware that I'm part of it. It's like I'm actually holding you over there as other and making judgments. Like, and I feel that humor is such a powerful way we bridge those divides. It's like, hey, can we actually acknowledge and share a conversation around what's wanting to evolve and what's happening here? So really it came down from a lot of the buzzwords that I see out there that are kind of stuck as band-aids over the top of a lack of perception. It's like, if I put this word here and then suddenly that means I fit a certain mold, it's like 7 figures, 6 figures, somatic. It's like just the little sound bites, these little clickbait pieces of content that we're creating. I was like, so much of that it feels like, the teenage boy revving his engine trying to impress the girls. It's like, it was actually really under the surface. There's these deep levels of insecurity. So that was what I meant about being the energetic fuckboy. It's like, I'm skimming the surface here because deep down, I'm actually not quite sure.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it is important for us to not think of the things that are bothering us and our industry and the world and basically all of the things outside of us, because we're connected to everything. So it can't be something separate. And the approach, using humor to confront an issue, to bring that conversation to the table, to say, hey, how deep are you going? How deep are you willing to take yourself and therefore your clients? And I find a lot of people in the industry, whilst everything has its place, and there are different, and I think it's important that there are different levels of intensity when it comes to energetic work and any kind of healing per se. But the depth, and you have said this as well, and something that is just so important to note is you can only take someone as deep as you can go, and the more you challenge yourself to go internally, and that's that coming home conversation that we were having as well. The more you can do that internally, that's to the depth that you can take someone else on their path, coaching, healing, friendship, love, all of the different aspects, and leading, especially leading in leadership. That's really important. But I love that conversation because it is kind of like being a fuck boy when you're only playing with the bells and the whistles and saying, I did this course and look at this, these are all these amazing things that I can do, look at all the millions of courses, and you can stay in a loop when you're wanting to work in facilitation and coach and heal and do all of those things. It's really easy to stay in the loop of continuously doing courses, but it's not the purpose of it. And I'm interested in your perspective about this. Do you think some people lean on that so not to go deep within themselves, even though they are doing these courses for self-discovery? Do you feel like sometimes they can do too much of that and it prevents that deep dive?
I love that you've asked this question, and it's funny, I can feel the threads of what you're getting at already. I'm just like, let's see what she's saying here. It's like digging in the mud. It's like I often talk about the lotus as like an arc, like as a physical manifestation of this concept. It's like the lotus goes into the mud to then emerge towards the sun. But some people like to just stay in the mud. It's like, okay, I'm digging down, I'm digging down, I'm digging down, I'm digging down. But really it's because you're so fucking scared to shine.
Yeah.
It's like, actually, I'm not willing to confront my soul's mission. I'm not willing to actually stand for what it is that I'm here for. I'm not willing to face my son. I'm not willing to face the thing that I'm here to bring through. So I'm just going to keep going into the mud. So
Yes.
that's exactly, yeah. I noticed that it's busy being busy, but in a different way. It's like we have these silos within the community. It's like you've got the entrepreneurs that aren't willing to go into the mud. They're just all flower, all show. And then you have these other people that are just continually digging.
Yes, and sometimes they cross over that sort of what we were talking about before about the fuck boy sort of energy and the way you're presenting in that way and the way that you're helping others in that way, but also staying in the mud like that it's just another way to stay hidden. And I think that's one of the other reasons why I adore you and your work, is because you are not hiding. There is nothing to hide. And I feel myself, and I love it, I feel myself being challenged to be out there more in my expression, and not what I think it needs to be, but just actually letting myself feel the feels, and I've got I'm aqua rising, so sometimes feeling it can be a bit, I like to, because I've got the Leo sun vibes going on, so I'm all about that fiery expression, but also sometimes it just gets a bit too much and I want to put the brakes on. And I feel like and I think this is common with people in the industry and just people in entrepreneurs in general, is they put the brakes on themselves in their expression, like, oh, okay, I've let a little bit of light out, that's enough. And I love that you spent a lot of time talking about how important letting those breaks go are, and doing it in a way that it's not where you're putting another, like a performing mask on. You're actually just being the true essence of you. But then again, that comes back to that original conversation that we were having about coming home to yourself. All of it is connected, right?
I feel like it's so easy. And, you know, sometimes there, I think much like you were saying, and now that I understand you're an Aquarius rising, that makes sense. It's like everything has its place. It's like, you know, you understand that more than anything with that particular placement, but it's like, it's not to say that it needs to be black or white. However, it's like we compartmentalize, and compartmentalization has its function. And it's like the function of compartmentalization is to be able to actually experience something in its essence. It's like we'll have something that we pull ourselves away from to be able to gain a unique perspective, to be able to bring it back in. And what I mean by that is we so often, we have work self, we have home self, we have spiritual self, and never the twain shall meet. And like that serves a certain function. Like I always remember my grandmother as a young woman telling me, you know, home stuff stays at home, work stuff stays at work. Whereas I'm like, well, realistically, we are multifaceted beings. And it's not to say that we need to cut ourselves open and bleed all over our social media. However, it's like, how much is that compartmentalization actually showing up in the energetics of how you're showing up? It's like, are you shaming and hiding those parts? Because that's going to come through. Or are you making a conscious choice that this is what is actually available for me to share in truth?
Yes.
Yeah.
Do you think that it's because there's so much of the extreme out there, because you've got people who are so oversharing, like they're sharing what they're cooking and when they're making a coffee, you know, so much of the background. And then you've got people who are not really sharing much of that side at all. And I challenged myself while I was away to share my the really personal, like my day-to-day personal stuff. So I was sharing stories. I don't, if you've been following me for a while, you will know I don't really do that. It'll be occasionally, but not really. And but I thought, okay, well, this, if I'm going to ever share some of the personal things, this is a really great thing to share. And I set an intention that I'd get some practice doing that and being mindful of it, and try and continue on when I get back. But I'm curious, do you think it's because of the extremes that we're seeing? People don't want to, or don't really know how to express in that way?
Such a good question. I feel that it's like it's almost that larger conversation about our relationship with what the internet is and how we create an avatar. I can't stand horror movies. I was a massive fan as a kid, but there's an anime called Perfect Blue, and I've watched countless video essays about it because of the psychological components, but I haven't actually brought myself to watch the movie. But it's the idea of understanding how we create a character or a public persona, and where does that persona end and the person begin?
Yeah.
And I think that we have this unique opportunity in the internet age to manufacture a personality. And so, if anything, like I feel that our conditioning, our wounding is really just projected in hypercolor, high definition with how we show up online a lot of the time. So this is who I told myself I needed to be loved. This is who I told myself I needed to be accepted. You know, even the oversharing, it's just like, oh, well, this is how it looks to be vulnerable.
Yeah.
It's just like, oh, okay, but is it?
It's interesting, isn't it? Because you're right, it does feel like, you know, everyone has an avatar, and how are they expressing it? Some people are only watching, they're not even posting. And then you've got the entrepreneurs who, there are a multitude. You've got some that just have such a beautiful natural expression in their content. They're just talking and it's natural. You've got others who you feel like they're not, you can see there's like a scaredy cat behavior where it's, you know, I'll just give you a little bit and then I'll run away. You've got others who are bearing it all, but you can tell the energy behind it is for attention. It's not a sacred vulnerability. And it's such a mix. And I think there is an opportunity for entrepreneurs to think more about their expression online. And it is, I've got a love-hate relationship with social media. I really do. I understand that it's an important tool. I've been in marketing most of my career, so I get it. But for me personally, it is, I don't want to have to do anything, but I also understand that I can't hide. People, won't automatically just know what I do if I don't share my wisdom and my guidance. And so it's, you kind of have to coach yourself a little bit through if there is wounding where you've got issues with worth, or you feel like you're not worthy of being heard, or whatever it is you've got going on. And again, I think that comes through that inner deep dive too. But do you feel like um entrepreneurs with a stronger mission have a harder time presenting online, or do you think it's a bit more random?
I'd be curious on your take on this as well, if you're open to giving it after I've shared my 2 cents. I think it can be it can polarize in either direction. It's like I work with a lot of people who have missions that feel so tender to the core of who they are, it feels like death. So is
Yeah.
that kind of component of, well, I've got to this certain level of success and that's worked for me, but yet I know there is this deeper aspect of who I am that's wanting to emerge, and that feels terrifying to actually open to that and to be witnessed in that. And then I also look at the other side of, I guess, people more like myself and how I experience it is that I often picture myself on my deathbed looking back. I'm like, would I be satisfied with what I gave? Like, if I know that this is really what I'm being called forward in, is my comfort worth more than the potential for what's possible?
Yes. Do you know, it's really interesting because I fluctuate between both. It's not one or the other. I spend a lot of time in both, I have to say, because my movement forward, my inability to be satisfied with this work, because I haven't fulfilled the full expression of what I know is my mission and my purpose, keeps me going, right? So that thought about being on my deathbed and leaving a legacy, and really in my heart knowing I've done all that I could to help and do my part as a human and the person in this meat suit and as a soul on this earth. But then there is the other side, and I have felt that over and over and over and over. And truthfully, there have been, because of the journey to date, there have been what I thought was, okay, this is it. This is what I'm being called to do. And it hasn't been. And so there has been that death aspect, right? But I it re it morphs into something greater, but it does feel like that part does feel like death, and that transformative aspect feels like death. And then I go, okay, this is definitely it. This is it. Oh, I've got the vision, I got the download, I understand the assignment, and then it happens again. And that's happened to me, I think, because of the trauma that I've had. It's had to be in these kind of segments, so not to freak me the fuck out, but also to prepare me energetically to hold it. And I understand that now. But at each sort of point, it has felt like I'm going through that death cycle. And it is terrifying and grueling and horrible and gut-wrenching. And I've got such a beautiful support team. But that has happened so many times. So I feel like there is an alternating. Now, I feel like that is happening less because I've cemented into I've got to the big ticket item now. And it's funny because I've always known it. But I also can see why it took so long, because the work that I'm doing with CEOs and large corporations, that's not, I to hold the energy and the frequency at that level required me to go through that training, if you will, because I would have got eaten alive if I had gone into it how I was before. Absolutely eaten alive in a lot of different aspects. I would have stepped straight back into the masculine, and I would have ended up being like one of them, when that's not what's required and what is not. And more information and more learning had to come into my awareness, and that self-trust and that exploration needed to happen in order for me to prepare. But that that doesn't mean that death cycle feels joyful, that's for sure. Do you feel like you fluctuate between the two, or you're just more anchored into that solid space of um thinking about your deathbed at the end?
It's interesting as you mentioned that. I think it's like that being the default orientation, and then definitely having been through those phases of initiation, much like you described. It's like I sit back and I think about the things that have emerged in terms of the vision and the ground, like the ground it actually wants to cover and the vastness of it.
Yeah.
I think if I had downloaded that at the beginning, I would have run for the hills. It's like it's that also that preparedness and investment in your own capacity to hold it and to be the steward of creating that. So yeah, definitely. Like I feel there have definitely been seasons where I feel like, am I actually going mad?
Yeah.
Like those parts where it does feel deeply vulnerable, and I feel like there tends to be a more of a default orientation. It's like the people that are like, actually, I'm willing to continue to walk through the fire,
Yeah.
or they sit down at the fire and stop for a season. And sometimes people don't get back up and keep going.
Yeah.
But I've definitely noticed the people that sit and stop at the fire as opposed to walk through it.
Yeah.
Mm.
And I think the if you're not feeling like you're going mad, I think maybe then you're not moving forward. I think that's my indicator when I start to feel like I'm losing my mind, that I'm actually on the right track. And as entrepreneurs, do you agree that sometimes it doesn't make sense, but you just know that you need to? Like, there's a part of you that doesn't really know how things are going to land, but you know this is what you're being what's being asked of you, what your soul is asking you to fulfill, and you just need to do it regardless of all the doubt and the fear.
I think particularly in this realm of spiritual entrepreneurship, it's like understanding spiritual business is the ultimate spiritual growth path, right? It's like that's so often being able to front up to that.
Yeah, absolutely. About being brave, continuously being brave, and it is tiring. Like, sometimes I think, man, I'm getting too old for this, but I have that I couldn't not be like this. So it's kind of like there is no choice really. It's like an inbuilt, and that's that default that you're saying. The default is thinking about the legacy and the impact that you're leaving on this world. And then there's the other part that's like, man, really, do I have to? Do I have to be the one? And the silly side of, I see the memes of, I'm looking for a man in finance with blue eyes, and he's, yeah, and I'm like, yeah, that would be good. Wouldn't that be a nice little breeze? And I'll just forget all about this. But you can't, because how satisfied would I be? Not very.
Exactly.
You can't just abandon you and your whole knowing. It's like it's in your DNA. And once you start on the spiritual journey and you activate those aspects and you ask the question to activate it, if you ask, you will receive it. But then just best be prepared that there is a road ahead, and you don't know what that looks like, but you have to go anyway.
I think it's yeah, you've definitely touched on such a current of what I feel is deeply resonant, like in that awakening process. It's like choose your hard. It's like
Yeah.
you choose mundanity, or you choose to be comfortable, and that's okay, and you count down the hours till death.
Yeah.
Or it's like the fact you know you're really alive by going out there and seeing what you're capable of.
Yes, and feeling a sense of satisfaction knowing what you're capable of. And just when you think you can't do it and you just do it anyway, you soon realize, actually, what else can I do? And then that cycle, that beautiful cycle, starts again, where you go through the fear and the doubt, and then you do it again, and it goes around and around. And depending on your discipline, your self-discipline, sometimes that cycle, you're going through that multiple times in a day sometimes. You know, I am very disciplined, and when it comes to the work side of things, I used to work for a big corporate for the first part of my career, and I got trained that way. Like from a work ethic perspective, I got trained that way. So that's just part of what I do now. But that's not normal. That's not a normal thing, you know, normal way of doing things. But I'm using it to my advantage where possible. But then there are times where you are going through deep transformation, and you do stand still, and you need to be still with it. It's not something you can push through, because as you know, the harder you push through, the more you end up staying stuck. But being still, and it reminds me of a post that you shared about chaos and dissonance, and about having to uh, self-resource rather than reach externally. And I was wondering, from your perspective, in um, in the entrepreneurial world, do you think that self-resourcing is our greatest asset?
Oh, 100%. It's like understanding what we we're coming back to before about the illusion of external certainty. It's like, I think, we've really had, some of us took notes and some of us decided to go back to sleep. But I think the pandemic was a big unveiling of that idea of how impermanent the nature of our situation is.
Yeah.
So if we're continually looking outside of ourselves for certainty, it's like in those spaces of chaos, when things shift, when they change rapidly, and you're waiting for the outside world to tell you, hey, it's okay, you might be waiting a long time. Whereas if you're able to actually come back to your inner sanctuary, that sense of like, hey, I know I've got me regardless of what's going on outside, having that and access to that and being able to channel that is how you continue to show up and make bold moves regardless of what's going on. Recession, the industry decides to regulate all coaching and you've got no certifications, whatever it may be. It's like it comes back to that inner sanctuary.
Yes, and I think it showed everyone where the gaps were internally, right? I know for me, I was living in Melbourne, so I was in lockdown for 9 months, and I was away from family and friends. My friends lived outside of the 5K, so I couldn't see them. At one stage, I didn't see anyone that I knew for 4 months, and so all of my core deep wounds were just having a party. It was just, they were on the surface. My cortisol levels were going through the roof. And even though I was doing my best to regulate, it was beyond me. But since then, the learning, the understanding, the healing, the integrating of that, I feel a lot more prepared should something like that happen again, and most likely will. But um I think that was an opportunity for everyone to sort of start to put into practice some of that self-regulation. But it is very easy, and we've been conditioned to reach externally, even for coaches, even for healers, even for food, wine, alcohol, whatever it is. But it is how we were taught. In school, you're not taught to self-regulate. You're not taught to go in some schools, they're starting to do that now. But for the most part, if parents aren't teaching the kids how to do that, they're not learning how. And I know for me, through my childhood, I only learned how to start doing those things when I started, when I had my spiritual awakening started, and I started doing meditation and somatic exercises and yoga and all sorts of different bits and pieces. But that is something that came really late in life. It wasn't new. So my go-to when my or my core wounding was up wasn't what I had recently learned. It was, oh no, what's going to happen to me? I'm alone. I'm fighting this internal battle all the time. Do you feel like, for entrepreneurs specifically, that internal self-regulation is the fundamental piece, not only for themselves, but what they need to encourage and share with their clients?
It's particularly if you're growth orientated. And it's like, if you think about the entrepreneurial mindset, It's like it's growth orientated. If you were in a business, guess what? You're going to want to grow it. And it's like, the famous story of Blockbuster and Netflix. Like Netflix comes in and says, "Hey, we've got a business opportunity for you," and Blockbuster laughs them out of the building. And now look who is dominating, right?
Yeah.
But again, that's such a testament to the idea that business is growth orientated. And wherever there is growth, there is that cycle of transformation. So if you're working with clients, if you're growing a business, inevitably there will be the chaos phase. There will be dissonance. There will be the falling away of the old for the making of the new, making way for the new. So that self-resourcing, being able to hold yourself through that turbulence is, I think, it's an essential resource, and particularly for people that are growth orientated.
Yes. And do you think that there's a responsibility that coaches and facilitators have to encourage that self-regulation? Like when I think about some of the healers and coaches that I've met along the way, some of them want you to be dependent on them, and that's not encouraging self-regulation. Do you think that that's an important responsibility if you're stepping into this line of work?
I feel like it's and even if you look at attachment styles, it's like being able to move into that phase of interdependence.
Yeah.
It's like, how well resourced is your client on asking for help? Because that's the other side of the spectrum, right? They might be the client that never asks. So it's like, hey, maybe for a period of time, they've actually got to build the muscle to recognize that it is safe to resource outside themselves. So I feel like it is this ultimately maturing the relationship with relationship.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
I love that. I find that is the case when I'm working with leaders in the corporates. And there is it's funny because they're at such a high level, but there is still this inability to ask for help and to drive their own healing, if you will, and their own strategy and their own mission. They want it to be external. They don't. There's a resistance to owning those aspects, and I find it intriguing for the most part. I'm compassionate, obviously, but I'm it's something that surprised me at such a high level. It surprises me that that's the energy and that's the like the underpinning start point in those relationships.
Mm.
Have you noticed that with your clients as well?
Where there is a desire for it to be held outside of themselves, you mean?
Yes.
It's interesting. I feel like I've had so many different experiences. I have definitely felt that there is like, I'm so responsible for everything else. Please just take this away.
Yeah.
It's like that kind of almost victim to my own success component of it. Typically, those aren't people that work very well with me. And again, we've all got our own journey and our own path. However, it's just like, I am not here to be a parent. And that's the other thing too. It's like, it's the presentation of the child. It's like when the inner child is actually at a point where they are looking for parent. It's like, I've had to be so responsible for now, and I don't want to be responsible anymore. I'm not sure if I'm answering your question, but
yeah, you are answering my question, and I agree. There's lots of different experiences, but I have found it a surprise that it's not just people who are starting, like solopreneurs who are sort of starting in that way. It happens on all levels of business, and you're right. It is a choice that you get to make depending on what kind of clients you want to work with and what your mission is. So whilst I in the past have had a very strict, I will not work with clients who are not ready, unfortunately that is not part of my mission. My mission is to go and shake up some things in areas where the karmic activity is so heavy and rife and so extreme in the opposite of where I stand, that that's not what I'm going to receive. And it's taken me quite a bit of time to get okay and comfortable and patient. That's my favorite word. It isn't, but I'm learning to make it my favorite word, patience, to step into that space, because you can't they're not at that level. That's not where they are. But you can lead them and have conversations, firm boundary conversations about what that looks like. So there's a way of working around it, and I found that, which is good. But I can appreciate and understand that because of the work that you do and where you are, should people want to step in, there is a requirement that they're going to have to own their shit. And I love that. And that's why your work resonates with me, because I'm already working in that at that level and in that way, but also the community that I talk to, like yourself and the other heart-led change makers that I talk to, they are doing that too. And that is a commitment that they have with themselves and the commitment that they have when they're working with others. And I was just curious as to what that felt like for you and what you had noticed as well. I wanted to share a post and a quote that you put out there that hit me really hard, and I'm going to read it because it's too long. I can't remember it off the top of my head, but it goes like this. Here's the thing. The potential of wrongness is the cost of true possibility. And to traverse the abyss between the known and the unknown is the place where many falter. And yet, this is the breeding ground of innovation, of growth and evolution. And I'm wondering, Jessicka, like, do you think this is one of the key fundamentals and the biggest block with entrepreneurs?
Wanted to circle back to our conversation just before when I was saying about the archetype of the child, because I feel like it's almost relevant here. It's like what you were saying before, how people are learning and relearning at different levels. I actually do notice that there are times when the wheels have fallen off, where we actually come back to that space of almost needing to. And there was a period of time where I was definitely no 100% self-responsibility in my spaces. Thank you very well, that's all. But it's more like actually being able to understand that sometimes people need to almost co-regulate. It's like, how do I evolve through this point of broken self-trust, which I think is, what I was speaking to there, like that cost of wrongness, like how we can remain looping in shame. We can remain looping in this sense of like, how do I trust myself when I have failed, inverted commas, failed myself so badly. And that again, that is part of the price of entrepreneurship, being in that growth oriented space. Like, Michael Jordan, entrepreneurs love to. I was almost trying to think of another example on the fly. My Mercury and Gemini was going, well, think of a better example. Don't talk about Michael Jordan. Ain't got no one. Michael Jordan it is. But he just talks about how many baskets he missed, right?
Yeah.
For all the goals he scored. It was all the baskets that he missed that actually allowed him to do that. And as an entrepreneur, it's like being in that abyss, being able to be okay with the fact it's like, oh, this is not how I thought it would work. It is where we innovate. It's where we become better at scoring the goals. And yet so many people are so terrified to stray into that space.
For sure it is. And it's being willing to just get it wrong, being willing to just try it anyway. And if it goes pear-shaped, it goes pear-shaped. All the best entrepreneurs, all the most successful ones have made millions and then lost it all. And they've done it over and over and over. But it is commitment to the self to keep trying and to understand that all of it is connected to something greater, because it's all leading to something else. That learning has to happen. But it's terrifying. I'm launching and creating something new with a friend, and it is work that I haven't ever done before. I've wanted to, absolutely. I thought it was like the end piece, like when you think of like a pyramid, like there's like stepping stones of things that you're going to do. Well, this is at the top, and I haven't done the bits in between yet. So for me, it's like a big stretch of my energetic system. It's a big stretch of my self-trust, a lot of things, but I've got someone who trusts me completely and, is right by my side. So I'm not doing it by myself, like all the other things that I've done before. But it's terrifying. And I was even saying to her yesterday, I sent her a meme where it's like the little girl eating an ice cream. She's excited, but you can tell she's having a hard time with a brain freeze. It's kind of like that. And I said to her, I'm just doing it anyway. I'm super excited and terrified, but and I feel responsible because it's not just me, it's her as well. But it is where the growth is, and it is where the evolution is. And I think it's a common place entrepreneurs stop. And sometimes they stop in that place forever. And sometimes they do have that breakthrough. And it might be a short stop, it might be a few months. And sometimes that's the end. But if you are at that place, what do you suggest? Like with entrepreneurs, if they find themselves in that place where they're kind of sort of stuck and they're sort of terrified in that loop of not wanting to be wrong and not wanting to get things, not wanting things to fall apart or to fail, especially for perfectionists, what would your suggestion be to start leading out of that space?
So I work a lot with the Hermetic principles, which I'm sure probably some of your listeners would have heard of. I'm just trying to get a gauge on that. So essentially, it's like the fundamental ideas that there are universal patterns that this world operates under. Hermetic principles. It's the idea that we have principle of correspondence. You guys have probably heard of as within, so without, as above, so below. That's principle of correspondence. Same with the principle of polarity. The degree of swing to the left is the degree of swing to the right. So it's this idea of how infatuated are you with your success that you're actually creating a cage within it?
Yep.
Because it's both. So it's like actually recognizing the cost and sitting with the cost of not taking action. Because we're so busy being so preoccupied with the cost of taking the wrong action, we're also not weighing up the cost of taking inaction.
Yeah. I mean, that is powerful. That statement is very powerful because it is that polarity between the two. Taking the action, sure, yeah, things might really fall apart. You might lose everything, absolutely. But what if you don't? What if this is the greatest thing that you've ever done and this unlocks all of the things that you've been waiting for? And it is a choice that you get to make, right? How what do you think it takes in that point to get brave, to make that choice one way or another?
I think it's almost the illusion that we're anywhere other than zero.
Yeah.
It's like, if you think about, and I don't know whether or not you've experienced, I'm sure I get the sense from Maryanne speaking to you and being that this is our first proper conversation, I get the sense you've been here, that there is permission that exists in zero when you're at the very bottom of something that doesn't exist when you feel like you're somewhere. It's just like, I've got nothing to lose, so there's everything to gain. And it's just like, it's again that idea that all the things that I have, all the things that I have done, it's like this carrying the heavy backpack. It's like,
yeah,
well, okay, what if now is zero still?
Yeah.
Because really, like, we want to get into the quantum structure of time and all of those things, but it's like, it is always zero if we choose it.
Absolutely. And you can be running a business for several years and still feel like you're at zero. I know I do. That's where I feel like I'm at right now, in ahead of launching this new area of work. I feel like I'm at zero. So I feel like if I don't do it, if I do it, there's lots to gain. And if I don't do it, I don't have anything really to lose. There is no real loss per se. It's not going to affect anything else, but it is hard to bend your mind into that space because there's like with the jet lag that I recently had at 2 o'clock in the morning, the catastrophizing that goes on over nothing, over something that hasn't even happened yet. What if you can't do it? And what if no one interacts with this offering and the blah blah blahs and the blah blah blahs, and you think, my God, but what if they do? And you're sort of talking yourself off a ledge when you're in that mode. But I think it's so true. There are points where you are at zero, even so far along your path, and that's a good sign. I think that is, it is a good place to be when you are feeling like you're at zero. And with timeline shifting, you were talking about that before, quantum jumping and the different timelines. On another timeline that's already active, you know, what you are wanting to create, it already exists. So you might as well go along willingly and follow the path. And if, and this is something that I'm curious to know what you think about this, but this is something that I think about a lot. If my heart and my soul is asking me to do it, and internally, intuitively, this is what I feel like I need to do, why would I be holding back? Like, what would be, you know, other than the fear side of things, obviously, the fear of failing or whatever, why wouldn't I just trust those aspects? And I think entrepreneurs forget to ask themselves that. Why am I not trusting? And instead of focusing on all the pear-shaped things, why not focus on why that self-trust is starting to flail? Do you, you know, is that something that that resonates with you and something that you notice with the clients that you work with?
It's interesting because I've experienced this, and again, it's going to sound a little bit strange, but like I work a lot with archetypes and bits and pieces like that. And I consider that often that faltering trust is actually a mistrust in the future version of self you're yet to meet. It's just like, well, but I know who I am here, but I don't know who I am over there. So
Yes.
it's almost that actually the collapse into this new version of self that is actually creating the tension and the resistance. Like, oh, what if I don't like this person? What if they can't get it right? What if they this other iteration of who I am and my other side of my potential?
Oof. I mean, that just hits. That is, oh, that is so on point. What if, because you don't know that person, you don't know what they're like, even though you do visualizations. I spend a lot of time visualizing and meditating that version, what she looks like, you know, what she wears, how she eats, what her energy is like, and so forth. And I'm making a mockery of it as I'm saying it to you, right? But the truth is, there is absolutely a feeling of, I don't trust who that is. And that's crazy, because that's you. That's just you know, and not to discount where you are now, but that's a better version of you. So why would you not trust who she is, where she's leading you? You know, that oh my God, that truer words have never been spoken. That is, that I think that for entrepreneurs listening, that's going to hit so hard, because it is, that's sort of what is underpinning, right?
Yeah, again, it's turning to face the sun. It's like if we think about the lotus metaphor again, it's like, you know, that's you growing to follow the sun. Like that's the other piece too. It's like this new, truer, use that word somewhat tentatively. We'll put that there and as a placeholder. But, you know, a more fully expressed, that's better. A more fully expressed version of who you be.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, that is uncomfortable because it also, in some ways, feels like you're invalidating who you have been.
Yeah, and who you are right now, where so all the confidence you've built up believing that you can do this thing starts to like flail and starts to get really insecure in comparison to your future self. And that's crazy, because that's still you. But then you're doing a comparison between you and your future self. And so you're invalidating yourself right here, right now, which is, I mean, that's mind bending. Just that concept is mind bending.
I talk about it living in the shadow of your future potential.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we actually like hide in our own shadow.
That's hurting my brain, Jessicka. That's hurting my brain. I That makes so much sense. That is amazing. And that is also what I wanted to talk to you about. So you use astrology in your work, in particular when you're working with clients on the shadow aspects. Can you talk to me and the audience about that? How does that work exactly?
So given what I'll give you a little bit of a context so we're all on the same page around how I relate with astrology. I see astrology a little bit similar to how Carl Jung looked at astrology. It's the idea that It is a map that we have used to map patterns between the cosmos and what's happening in our psyche. So this idea, if you believe with the collective unconscious, the fact that, there are certain archetypal images that come forth, whether or not that's the jester or the mother or whatever archetype that might be. There are these primordial images that seem to transcend any one individual experience. That is the zodiac. So the zodiac signs are these 12 core archetypes that seem to be universal. And then over the course of centuries, we've looked at the sky and we've mapped these archetypes. We're like, well, when the sun is illuminating this particular archetype, what is actually showing up in human behavior? So that fundamentally, from like a more scientific and less esoteric principle, it's like interesting that the idea that we can actually have a map for what's moving in the psyche. So from that then, and I tend to believe that there is no accidents. I think that there is actually deep intentionality in all things. There's governing intelligence. It's the same idea that the time, place, and date you were born was very intentional. It was a snapshot of those archetypal images that were being activated. So from that perspective, what we're actually seeing is an imprint of what was imprinted in the very depths of your psyche.
Yep.
Through which we filter experience. So for me, when I'm working with clients using astrology for shadow work, it's looking at these archetypes and how we're relating to them, how they're being animated, and then understanding the position of the planets and that energy, because each of the planets expresses a specific transformative force. So information is Mercury. Venus is beauty, it's love. Mars is creation and destruction. So each of these energetic forces is being expressed through particular archetypes. And then it's really about evaluating your relationship with them. So it's like, if you understand how you create and destroy is in the flavor of Aries, Aries being the war god, it's like, how comfortable are you with aggression?
Yeah.
Like, how do you channel your aggression? So those are the things that can start to be a catalyst for some deeper questions and different ways for us to actually gain perspective on who we are.
It's just so interesting because I feel like this forms how people express themselves online as well. So it's not just in their business, but the aspect of their business where they're presenting themselves to the big wide world comes through. And spending time understanding how, like, what the impacts are, because I think there's lots of important tools. Like human design was like a real light bulb moment for me, learning that I'm a projector, so I don't operate like most of the people in the world, and respecting that and understanding my energy levels, that was a game changer. But understanding the astro impacts on business and expression is, I feel like, another big piece of the puzzle that a lot of people haven't paid attention to. I think they understand their own astrology. A lot of people who are on the spiritual journey have spent time in that space, but not how that relates to business. And I think it's a really unique offering that you have, especially because you're focused on the shadow. It's not just, oh, you're a Leo sun, so you've got this beautiful expression, and you love beautiful things and blah blah blah, and you're loud and out there. The shadow aspect is where the story is. That's what I think. And I think our greatest stories, and this is just what's coming through now, is based on our shadow, and is based on the stories of our shadow. Right, that I think is just a chef's kiss. And I love that that's your focus with your work.
I feel like, particularly, again, with your placement with the sun in Leo, it's like understanding so much of our self-definition comes from what we define ourselves against.
Yeah.
And the shadow is that song. It's the song that we sing to ourselves all day, every day. It's like, this is what I am, this is what I'm not. And so that's actually really how we're experiencing ourselves. So the better we get clear on how we're defining ourselves, the more we get to adapt the narrative to fit our aims.
I'm interested, do you think the sun in astrology is more the ego rather than the self?
It's interesting because the sun can show up as both. And I talk about like levels of maturation in the expression. So even with, as I said, coming back to that idea of Mars and Aries, it's just like, in the immature expression, it might be outright competitiveness. It's like, but as you evolve the expression of a Mars and Aries, it's actually being able to understand there is a permission for boldness and for drive and for innovation and for leadership. So I feel like the sun also has that, at its in its immature or undeveloped or unrealized potential, it is the things that we've sort of taught ourselves are valuable about who we are. So this is
Yeah.
who I need to be. This is how I need to shine. But it's like actually being able to strip that away to allow the purity and the truth of that to come through is when we mature the expression of the sun. And it actually brings vitality. It's actually allowing like our own soul to shine upon us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is so interesting because I don't feel, as I've gotten older and matured and had lots of different life experiences, the sun aspect, like the Leo sun, I don't feel I resonate with as strongly as my Cap moon and my Aqua rising. I feel like there are other placements. I've got a lot of Taurus and Scorpio placements and Virgo as well through my chart, and I feel some of those more. I feel that relates more to my expression than my sun sign. And I'm curious, do you, with entrepreneurs, depending on where their cycle is and what they're working through and what they're breaking through, do you find that there are different aspects of their chart that resonates more strongly or activates more?
It's interesting, depending on what's coming up, will be present to certain planetary influences more, because like I said before, each of the planets corresponds to an energetic force.
Yeah.
So I was even thinking about, like, as you were speaking, like your commitment to authenticity is so Leo sun.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's like, I was like, okay, that's interesting that maybe you just don't see it as much. And that's the interesting thing too about our own sun. It's like the sun doesn't see itself.
I never made that connection. I have to say, I've never thought about it like that.
Because that's the truth of the heart of Leo. Like Leo is the heart. It's like it's actually the commitment to being fully myself. It's actually the authenticity and being able to shine my light that way. But yeah, for entrepreneurs, it's because I've recently run an astrology for shadow work container. I looked at through the course of the program, we've looked at 4 primary placements. And these are the ones that I notice people get stuck at and tripped up in. It's like, as we spoke about before, chaos and dissonance being an inevitable part of growth. The first place we're going to look when we're getting tripped up is the moon. The
Yep.
moon is our sense of safety. It's our sense of grounding. It's our sense of nurture. It's like if that is threatened, that archetype is somehow being undermined, it's like we go into a freeze.
Do you associate that with the inner child?
The moon can definitely be anchored because it's the mother as well. It's our relationship with the mother. So yeah, mother-child dynamic very much outlined with the relationship with the moon.
Yeah. So interesting. I could talk to you about all of this for hours, but I haven't got hours to talk to you, unfortunately, today. But I will get you back because there are 700 million other questions that I have to ask you. But my last question is, what do you love most about being a change maker?
Oh, that's such a good question. It's like I've got the soul level response and the egoic response. I'm like, okay, let's just sink into that one a little bit. It's the cosmic dance. I feel like, and that's where, so anyway, this is going to probably be a conversation for you and I at some point at Maryanne, but it's like the relationship with the ego and the soul's expression isn't as far apart as people like to make them out to be. But it's like, how beautiful is it that I get to sit across from you and experience your divinity as a reflection of my divinity and the reflection of our shared divinity?
Oh, just goosebumps. That is, oh, that is beautiful. That and so true, because that's what it feels like when I get to interview people and have conversations with the beautiful people around me and the ones that I get to connect with. That's what it feels like. And you're right. The the soul and the ego is very close, and it is. Isn't that just gorgeous though? Like, and humorous. I think it's funny. I actually think it's funny because in spirituality, there is this whole like be pure and you've got to be a certain specific way. But I've got the goosebumps, and I can feel my guides pissing their pants, because some of my guides are very naughty. They are very cheeky, and when I'm being too strict with things, they yank me in. They humble me quickly. I can tell you that. But that is so true, and such a beautiful gift, and such a gorgeous thing to say, and to have resonate, because that is what it is. That is change making, and it is about building communities and connecting. But that connection is seeing the truth in other people and seeing who they are in their fullness, without judgment, without anything else, but also knowing that that's what you're receiving as well. And that's, oh, I just love that so much. How can our audience best connect with you?
Probably the best place to haunt me is on Instagram. The Jessicka Anne. I'm most active there at this particular point in time. Otherwise, Jessicka Anne on Facebook as well.
Yes, stalk her. She's amazing. All of her content is, oh, it will trigger you in the best possible way and get your brain thinking more about where you're holding yourself back. And Jessicka, thank you so much for being on the show today and sharing your perspective on elevating global consciousness, and the conversations we were having about going within and exploring more, coming home to yourself. I just love that part of our conversation, and it has been an absolute pleasure, as I knew it would.
It's been so beautiful to share this space with you and shine in your generous Leo heart.
I will, now that I'm remembering that it's related to my authenticity, and encouraging other people to be the same. That was a very good reminder.
Thank you, love.
Thank you.